I stood at the altar trembling as my high school tormentor slipped $1 million ring onto my finger. Tristan swore to make my life a living hell. He bought me to break me. But when 2 pink lines appeared on a plastic stick, his entire revenge plan shattered into pieces. Money is a suffocating concept. When you have it, it is a shield. When you lose it, it becomes a noose around your neck. My father, Robert Hayes, tightened that noose himself. He was a proud beta who built a modest real estate firm, but a string of terrible investments and underground gambling debts left us with absolutely nothing. We were facing the loss of our home, our dignity, and worse, my father was facing prison time for embezzlement. That was when the Gallaghers stepped in. They were the apex predators of our city's elite. Caroline Gallagher, a terrifyingly composed alpha, ran their empire with an iron fist. She had one problem, though, her son Tristan. Tristan was an alpha of pure pedigree, devastatingly handsome, with piercing green eyes, but reckless. He needed an Omega to ground him a marriage to secure his public image before he could take over the family board. And Caroline, knowing my father's desperate situation, offered a trade. She would clear the $3 million debt, keep my father out of jail, and in exchange, I would belong to Tristan. I didn't have a choice. I was a newly presented Omega, 22 years old, soft-spoken, and utterly terrified. The horror of the arrangement wasn't just that I was being sold. It was the buyer. Tristan Gallagher and I were not strangers. We had attended the same elite private high school. Back then, before I presented, I was just a quiet kid with a target on my back. Tristan was the king of the hallways, and for reasons I never understood, he made it his personal mission to destroy my teenage years. He shoved me into lockers, mocked my clothes, and humiliated me in front of the entire cafeteria by pouring spoiled milk over my head, calling me a defective late bloomer. His scent, back then sharp cedar and black pepper, used to send me into panic attacks. Now that same scent was going to be in my bed. The wedding was a lavish, cold affair covered by every major society magazine. I wore a tailored white silk suit that felt more like a straitjacket. Flashbulbs blinded me as I walked down the aisle. My father wouldn't even look me in the eye. At the end of the altar stood Tristan. He looked immaculate in a dark tuxedo. His jaw set his eyes burning with a familiar, cruel amusement. When the priest asked for our vows, Tristan took my trembling hands. His grip was painfully tight. He leaned in his lips, brushing my ear, putting on a show of affection for the hundreds of watching guests. "Don't think for a second. This means you've won," Tristan whispered, his voice vibrating with venom, a harsh contrast to the romantic setting. "My mother forced my hand, Oliver. But you're in my world now. I bought you to break you, and I am going to enjoy every single second of it." A tear slipped down my cheek. The photographer captured it, probably assuming it was a tear of joy. Tristan wiped it away with his thumb, pressing hard enough to bruise. "I do," I choked out. The reception was a blur of fake smiles and polite nods. Tristan ignored me entirely, choosing instead to drink heavily with his groomsmen, occasionally shooting me glares that made my Omega instincts scream in submission. I smelled his pheromones, spiking with hostility. When we finally left for his private estate in the hills, the car ride was suffocatingly silent. His mansion was a sprawling masterpiece of glass and cold grey stone. It felt like a beautifully designed prison. The moment the heavy oak doors clicked shut behind us, the charade dropped completely. Tristan loosened his tie, pouring himself a scotch from the crystal decanter in the foyer. "Your room is at the end of the east wing," he said, not even looking at me. "Mine is in the west. Do not cross over to my side. Do not touch my things, and do not embarrass me in public. Tristan, I started, my voice shaking. We don't have to do this. We can just coexist. He turned, closing the distance between us in 2 long strides. The overwhelming scent of angry alpha hit me like a physical blow. I pressed my back against the wall, my breathing hitching. He slammed his hand against the plaster right next to my head. We aren't partners, Oliver. He snarled, his green eyes dark with intoxication and spite. You are collateral. You're the trash my mother bought to make me look like a respectable family man. Stay out of my sight and maybe you'll survive this. He walked away, leaving me alone in the massive, echoing foyer. I sank to the floor, pulling my knees to my chest, and cried until my throat was raw. My life was officially over. The first 3 months of our marriage were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Tristan kept his promise. He treated me like a ghost when we were alone. But the moment we were in public at charity galas or corporate dinners, he played the role of the doting, fiercely protective alpha husband. His sudden shifts from cold indifference behind closed doors to possessive touches in front of the cameras gave me emotional whiplash. To make matters worse, he started bringing Liam Davies to the house. Liam was a stunning, wealthy Omega, who had been Tristan's rumoured fling before our forced marriage. Liam had a sharp tongue and a scent like crushed roses that always seemed to linger in the living room long after he left. Tristan would sit with him on the velvet sofas, laughing, drinking wine, and completely ignoring my presence while I sat quietly in the dining room picking at my food. It's really a shame, Ollie, Liam sneered one afternoon while Tristan was in his study. Liam was swirling his champagne glass, eyeing my simple sweater. Tristan is a passionate alpha. It must be so boring for him being tied down to someone so plain. Someone who smells like cheap chamomile. I bit my tongue, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. I poured all my frustrations into my daily phone calls with my best friend, Noah. Noah was a fierce beta who threatened to drive over and key Tristan's sports cars at least twice a week. You have to stand up to him, Oliver, Noah would say. He's feeding off your fear. But standing up to an alpha like Tristan felt impossible. Until the night everything shifted. It happened in the middle of a vicious thunderstorm. The power had flickered out across the estate. I was in the kitchen searching for a flashlight when I heard a low, guttural groan coming from the hallway. I froze. The air suddenly grew thick. It was heavy, suffocating, and intoxicating all at once. The sharp cedar and pepper scent of Tristan's pheromones exploded through the house, so potent it made my knees buckle. My own body reacted instantly, a sweet flush of white peach washing over my skin. A rut. Tristan's rut had hit him early, brought on suddenly and violently. I should have run. I should have locked myself in the east wing. But my Omega instincts betrayed my logic. I found him collapsed near the staircase, his face flushed, chest heaving, his tie ripped off and thrown aside. Tristan, I whispered, taking a cautious step forward. His head snapped up. His eyes weren't the cold, calculating green I was used to. They were dark, blown wide, with primal need. He growled a terrifying sound that rattled in his chest, and before I could turn, he lunged. He pinned me to the hardwood floor, his heavy frame pressing me down. I whimpered, terrified of the bully who had tormented me for years. But instead of violence, Tristan buried his face in the crook of my neck. He inhaled deeply, shuddering as he breathed in my scent. Mine. He murmured, his voice hoarse, completely stripped of his usual arrogance. Smells so sweet. Mine. That night was a blur of feverish heat and raw emotion. Stripped of his ego and his grudges, Tristan was a completely different person. He was desperate, worshipful, and overwhelmingly gentle. For 3 days we were locked in a haze of instinct. He held me as if I was the most precious thing in his world, whispering apologies into my skin that I couldn't fully comprehend in the heat of the moment. We crossed lines we swore we never would. We became exactly what our biology demanded. But when the fever finally broke, on the 4th morning, reality came crashing back. I woke up alone in his massive bed. The sheets were cold. I pulled my robe tightly around myself and walked downstairs, finding Tristan fully dressed in a tailored suit standing by the window. His posture was rigid. "Tristan," I rasped. He didn't turn around. What happened was a biological mistake. He said, his voice like ice. The harsh tone felt like a physical slap after the intimacy we had just shared. My suppressants failed. It meant nothing. "Do not think this changes our arrangement, Oliver. I still can't stand the sight of you." He walked out the front door, leaving for a week-long business trip without looking back. My heart, which had foolishly started to hope during those 3 days in the dark, shattered completely. I retreated back to my wing, vowing to build walls so high he could never touch me again. 5 weeks later, the morning sickness started. At first I thought it was stress. My father had called asking for more money, and Caroline Gallagher had dropped by to critique my hosting skills. But the nausea persisted. Certain smells, especially coffee and heavy perfumes, made me sprint to the bathroom. My scent began to change, the white peach deepening into something richer, sweeter. Terrified, I drove to a pharmacy 3 towns over, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses so no one would recognize me. I bought 4 different brands of tests. Sitting on the edge of the marble bathtub in my isolated bathroom, I waited. My hands shook so badly, I dropped one of the sticks. The digital timer on my phone mocked me as the 3 minutes ticked by. When the alarm chimed, I forced myself to look. Positive, positive, pregnant, positive. The plastic sticks clattered into the sink. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, all the color draining from my face. Tristan had made it explicitly clear during our honeymoon phase, or lack thereof, that he never wanted a family with me. I would never let my bloodline mix with trash, he had sneered on our wedding night. Now I was carrying his pup, an alpha's heir. Panic, cold and sharp, gripped my chest. If Tristan found out, he would take the baby and throw me away. With his wealth and power, I would never stand a chance in court. He could lock me out of my child's life forever. I rested a trembling hand over my flat stomach. I didn't know how to be a parent, and I certainly didn't know how to navigate this nightmare. But as I sat there on the cold bathroom floor, a fierce, primal instinct flared to life inside me. I was not going to let Tristan Gallagher break me, and I was absolutely not going to let him break my baby. I had to hide it. I had to run. Fear became my constant companion. Every time Tristan walked into a room, I held my breath, terrified. He would detect the subtle, sweetening shift in my scent. Alphas are notoriously sensitive to pregnancy pheromones, their biology hardwired to protect a carrying omega. But Tristan was so deeply consumed by his own bitterness and corporate ambitions that he remained oblivious to the life growing inside me. Hiding a pregnancy from a powerful alpha husband in a house full of staff was like walking a tightrope over a pit of vipers. I started wearing oversized sweaters, claiming the massive stone mansion was too drafty. I replaced my lightly scented body washes with overpowering artificial citrus soaps to mask the deepening aroma of white peach and honey that now clung to my skin. My best friend Noah Brooks became my only lifeline. We met at a rundown diner on the edge of the city, far from the Michelin-starred restaurants the Gallaghers frequented. When I slid the ultrasound photo across the sticky Formica table, Noah choked on his coffee. "Are you insane?" Noah hissed, his beta instincts flaring with protective anger. He grabbed my hands across the table. "Oliver, if Tristan finds out, he will lock you in that glass cage of a house forever. Or worse, Caroline will take the baby the second it's born and ship you off with a non-disclosure agreement." "I know," I whispered, tears pricking my eyes. "That's why I need your help, Noah. I have to disappear." Noah didn't hesitate. Over the next 2 weeks, he orchestrated a masterpiece of evasion. He bought a burner phone, withdrew cash in small, untraceable increments, and rented a tiny apartment under a fake name in a rainy, forgotten coastal town 300 miles away. The catalyst for my departure arrived sooner than expected. Tristan was hosting a massive pre-merger dinner party at the estate. The house was crawling with socialites, politicians, and ruthless executives. I was exhausted, my first trimester nausea hitting me in waves, but I forced myself into a tailored suit and played the dutiful, silent spouse. Midway through the evening, I retreated to the empty library to catch my breath. The door clicked shut behind me, and I jumped. Liam Davies was standing by the mahogany bookshelf, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "Looking a little pale, Ollie," Liam sneered, stepping closer. His crushed rose scent was suffocatingly smug. "But I suppose the stress is finally getting to you. I'd be stressed too if I were in your shoes." "Leave me alone, Liam," I muttered, turning toward the door. "I wouldn't rush off," Liam said, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "I'm actually doing you a favor. You should know. Tristan finalized the divorce paperwork yesterday. His mother's board vote is next Friday. Once he's officially named CEO, your contract is up. He's kicking you to the curb. He told me himself." My blood ran cold. I knew Tristan hated me, but the thought of being thrown onto the streets pregnant and penniless sent a spike of pure, unadulterated panic through my chest. Liam's cruel laughter echoed in my ears as I shoved past him, blindly navigating the hallways until I reached the east wing. I didn't pack clothes. I didn't take any of the designer watches or diamond cufflinks Tristan had bought for public appearances. I took the small bag of cash Noah had given me, a single picture of my father, and my ultrasound scan. Before I left, I pulled the heavy $1 million wedding ring off my finger. I placed it in the center of Tristan's pristine mahogany desk in his study. Next to it, I left a single piece of paper with 4 words written on it. "You win. I'm gone." I slipped out the servants' entrance, climbed into Noah's waiting hatchback, and watched the cold, imposing gates of the Gallagher estate fade into the darkness. I cried until my lungs burned, mourning a husband who never loved me, and a life that was built on a lie. I didn't know the absolute chaos that erupted 12 hours later. According to Noah, who monitored the fallout through city gossip, Tristan had returned to his study the next morning and found the ring. At first, he was reportedly furious, tearing the East Wing apart, assuming I was throwing a tantrum. But then his heightened alpha senses picked up on something. In my frantic rush to pack my toiletries, I had forgotten to empty the small woven trash can in my en-suite bathroom. Hidden beneath a discarded makeup wipe was the wrapper of a prenatal vitamin and the receipt from the out-of-town pharmacy where I bought the tests. Noah later told me that a housekeeper found Tristan sitting on the floor of my bathroom, clutching the receipt. The arrogant, untouchable billionaire was shaking violently, his green eyes bloodshot. The realization of what he had done, of what his cruelty had driven away, finally shattered his iron facade. He hadn't just chased away his forced husband. He had chased away his pregnant mate. For months, The Gallaghers unleashed a terrifying manhunt. Private investigators tore through the city. Tristan threw Liam out of his house, threatening to destroy the Davies family fortune if Liam ever spoke my name again. But Noah had covered my tracks perfectly. I was a ghost. 6 months passed. I traded the glittering skyline of the city for the misty grey beaches of a small Oregon coastal town. I worked the cash register at a quiet, dusty bookstore that smelled of old paper and sea salt. My life was simple, isolated and safe. My belly was now swollen and heavy. The baby, a little girl, the clinic had told me, was incredibly active, constantly kicking against my ribs. I spent my evenings knitting tiny sweaters and reading parenting books, finding a strange, quiet peace in my solitude. I missed my father, and I missed Noah, but the protective instincts of an Omega kept me fiercely grounded. I was doing this for her. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The rain was pouring in sheets against the bookstore windows. I was humming softly, boxing up a shipment of paperback novels, my hand resting protectively over my stomach. The bell above the door chimed. "I'll be right with you," I called out, not looking up from the cardboard box. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Then a scent hit the air. It wasn't the sharp, aggressive cedar and black pepper that used to send me into panic attacks. It was muted, deeply distressed, laced with the heavy metallic tang of alpha sorrow. My breath caught in my throat. The box cutter slipped from my hand, clattering onto the wooden floorboards. I looked up. Standing in the doorway, dripping wet from the rain, was Tristan. He looked entirely unrecognizable. The impeccably tailored suits were gone, replaced by a soaked, wrinkled trench coat. He had lost weight, his cheekbones sharp and hollow, and dark, bruised bags hung under his bloodshot green eyes. He looked broken. My hands flew to my swollen stomach, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "How?" I choked out, backing away until my spine hit the bookshelf. "How did you find me?" "Noah," Tristan rasped. His voice was raw, like he had been screaming. "He didn't betray you. I bought his father's medical debt. I paid for his sister's college tuition. I begged him, Oliver. I got on my knees in the middle of a crowded restaurant and begged him to tell me if you were alive. Get out," I commanded my Omega instincts, flaring a sudden fierce snarl escaping my lips. "You have no right to be here. You made your choice. You hated me. You let Liam tell me about the divorce." Tristan flinched as if I had physically struck him. He took a slow, agonizing step forward, keeping his hands raised in surrender. "There was no divorce, Oliver. Liam lied. I was going to fire him from the firm, and he lashed out at you. I never filed papers. I would never let you go, because I'm your property." I cried, tears spilling over my cheeks. "Because your mother bought me. Look at me, Tristan. I am carrying your child, and I would rather raise her in a cardboard box than let her near the poison of your family." "I know." Tristan shouted, his voice cracking. He suddenly dropped to his knees, right there on the dusty floorboards. The mighty Tristan Gallagher, kneeling in a puddle of rainwater. "I know I am a monster. But Oliver, you have to listen to me. Please." I froze, my chest heaving. Tristan looked up at me, tears mixing with the rain on his face. "I didn't buy you because of my mother." He confessed, the words tumbling out of him in a desperate rush. "I manipulated the board. I manipulated the debts. I made sure your father's firm went under, just enough so my mother would step in. I orchestrated the entire marriage." My jaw dropped. "What way?" "Because I have been obsessed with you since we were 16 years old," he sobbed, clutching the fabric of his coat. "When we were in school, before you even presented your scent, drove me insane. But I was the Gallagher heir. I was supposed to be ruthless, untouchable. Caring about a quiet, sweet beta's son made me feel weak. So I bullied you. I tried to push you away to break the hold you had on me. And when you presented as an omega, it only got worse. He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. When my mother brought up an arranged marriage, I saw my chance to finally have you. But when I got you in my house, looking at me with so much terror, it killed me. I realized my high school cruelty had destroyed any chance of you ever loving me. I acted cold because I didn't know how to undo the damage I caused. And when my rut hit, those 3 days were the only time I let myself be honest. When I woke up, I was terrified of how much power you had over me. So I pushed you away again. I stared at him, my mind spinning. The bully who tortured me, the husband who ignored me, it was all a toxic, twisted defense mechanism from a man who didn't know how to love. When I found the clinic receipt, Tristan continued looking up at my pregnant belly with a look of absolute reverence and devastation. I realized I had driven my mate and my pup into the cold. I cut my mother off, Oliver. I stepped down from the company. I gave up the CEO title. I don't care about the money. I don't care about the legacy. I only care about you. He reached into his coat and slowly slid a thick manila envelope across the floor. These are annulment papers, signed by me, and a trust fund document in your name, completely independent of the Gallaghers. You have total freedom. If you want me to walk out that door and never come back, I will. I needed you to know that I love you. I have always loved you. The silence in the bookstore was deafening, broken only by the sound of the rain. I looked at the papers, then at the man sobbing on the floor. All the anger, all the fear I had harbored for years suddenly felt incredibly heavy. Before I could speak, a sharp, agonizing cramp ripped through my abdomen. I gasped, doubling over and gripping the edge of the counter. Warm fluid rushed down my legs, pooling on the floorboards. The stress, the shock, it was too much. Oliver. Tristan was on his feet in a microsecond, his alpha instincts overriding everything else. He caught me before my knees hit the ground, his strong arms wrapping around me. "The baby!" I whimpered, clutching his soaked lapels. "Tristan, it's too early. The baby." I've got you, my sweet Omega. I'm right here." He promised, his voice suddenly steady, a grounding force in the chaos. He scooped me up into his arms effortlessly, kicking the bookstore door open and rushing me to the black SUV idling at the curb. The next 12 hours were a blur of blinding hospital lights, agonizing contractions, and the sterile smell of antiseptics. Through it all, Tristan never left my side. He held my hand, letting me crush his fingers during the worst of the pain. He whispered words of encouragement, wiping the sweat from my brow, his pheromones intentionally soothing, bathing me in protective cedar and warmth. When the sharp cry of a newborn finally pierced the quiet of the delivery room, I collapsed back against the pillows entirely spent. Dr. Evans, a kind older beta, smiled over his surgical mask. "You have a beautiful, healthy baby girl, Mr. Hayes." Tristan was weeping openly now. The nurse cleaned our daughter, wrapping her in a pink blanket before gently placing her on my chest. She had a mop of dark hair, and when she briefly opened her eyes, I saw flashes of familiar, brilliant green. I looked up at Tristan. He was staring at her, as if she held the entire universe in her tiny fists. He reached out with a trembling finger, gently stroking her soft cheek. "She's perfect," he whispered, pressing a reverent kiss to my damp forehead. "You're both perfect. I'm so sorry, Oliver. I will spend the rest of my life making this up to you." Looking at the man who had caused me so much pain, I finally saw the person hiding beneath the armor. It wouldn't be easy. Forgiveness isn't a light switch. It's a bridge that takes time to rebuild. But as Tristan held my hand, looking at our daughter with pure, unconditional love, I knew we were finally walking off the battlefield. The bully was gone. In his place was a father, a mate, and a man who was finally ready to be a husband. Did Oliver make the right choice in giving his ruthless alpha husband a second chance, or should he have taken the money and run? The Omegaverse is full of wild twists and undeniable fate. If you were hooked by Oliver and Tristan's emotional roller coaster, hit that like button, share this dramatic story with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more intense, heartbreaking, and swoon-worthy romance stories every single week. Drop your thoughts in the comments below.